show's on the air. Great to have you along. In studio guest Martin Lehr, CEO, co-founder of Context Therapeutics. I know Trace. It's hard to drum when you're trying to write down a stock symbol, isn't it? Martin Lehr, of course, publicly traded company with a stock symbol CNTX. You got that? Did you write that down?
Yes.
Oh, you wrote it down.
That's already on the watch.
Oh, I knew
on
it
the
was.
post-it.
Yes. CNTX is a stock symbol, contexttherapeutics.com. We've been talking about a top-down sort of discussion on cancers. Let's talk about what you guys are up to. Obviously, you're optimistic about what you're seeing here. So talk about exactly what you guys are doing first with your therapies.
Yeah. So we're developing drugs for primarily female cancers, so those being breast, ovarian, and uterine cancer, which is also referred to as endometrial cancer. So these are cancers that about 400,000 women are diagnosed per year, about 50,000 women die of it. Once you have metastatic versions of those diseases, there are no cures. So
metastatic means it has spread into other parts of the body? Yeah.
All over your body,
Yeah.
at least 2 other sites in the body. And so what we're focused on doing is developing drugs to extend the lives of these women with these diseases, and then to give them a really high quality of life. That's the goal. The way we're doing that is developing 2 drugs. They have nifty names. One is ONA-XR. It's an oral blocker of the hormone progesterone. Progesterone, we know, is a driver of breast, ovarian, and endometrial cancer. And we actually know that from contraceptive studies. So women who got long-term progestin therapy versus estrogen therapy as a contraceptive, if you got long-term progesterone, you actually had a 25% increased risk of getting breast cancer.
No kidding.
If you got estrogen, you had a 25% decrease. And so,
well, had we known that then, right? There would have
yeah,
been some changes,
so,
right?
so we found that out about 10 years ago, and so it gave us the first hint, maybe we should really block not just estrogen, but also progesterone. Maybe
Right.
progesterone's even worse. So we have a drug that blocks progesterone. It's been in about 150 patients to date, and what we're seeing is really exciting activity. And so for us, what that means is it's taking the tumors, it's keeping them in check. In some cases, it's shrinking them. Patients are on the drug for a pretty long period of time, and they're doing that with really, really good tolerability. So they're not losing their hair, they're not super fatigued,
Right.
they can go about their daily lives.
And ONA-XR is pretty far through phase 2, correct?
Yeah.
All the way through. So talk about that. I mean, because that's something that a lot of us don't understand. What is that process like? There aren't any shortcuts, are there, for an FDA approval?
Yeah, no, and even with the COVID vaccines, the reason they were able to cut the timeline short, it wasn't they didn't cut it short, it's if you have infinite dollars and infinite people and you can work 24/7 and everyone's motivated
so you're
to work
checking
24.
all the boxes and getting
Yes,
it done.
then we could get approved very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But in the normal realm of biotech companies, even the Pfizers of the world, you have clinical trials, you have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, each step a little bit of a higher bar for efficacy and safety. Ultimately, the burden of proof being a randomized control trial showing that you're better than placebo.
Okay.
So where we are is we've finished phase 1, had promising activity. We're now in a series of phase 2 trials across these cancers, the most advanced of which is in endometrial cancer. We reported recently really exciting data there where we're shrinking tumors.
So in all 3, the metastatic breast cancer, SMILE, Alona, and Oath, all 3 are walking through this phase 2. And those are the 3.
Those are the 3, and the next update for us is actually the second quarter.
Okay.
So pretty soon we'll be giving an update on the endometrial trial, showing again how good of a job we're potentially doing in shrinking the tumors and what the side effect profile of the drug
What's the
looks like.
timeline of those? Like, how long does that take?
The overall trial takes about 2 years.
Okay,
Until you can say, okay, this worked, it met our statistical thresholds for success or hopefully not failure.
And then what happens? What happens when you get into phase 3? Is that another 2 years potentially? Could it be shorter? Could it be longer?
So with oncology, the timelines are a little bit different with the FDA because if you don't give the patient the drug, theoretically they would die.
Right.
You're not treating cough. You're not.
I gotcha.
It's a serious medical issue.
Right.
So what you can do is something called a rolling submission. So once you've had the majority of your events in the trial, the majority of patients get the drug and see an outcome, you can start talking to the FDA and submitting the paperwork instead of waiting for the whole trial to finish. So for a phase 3 trial, you can do it in about 2 years and then start the 1-year submission clock from there.
And with the outcomes that we're going to see, if we can wave a magic wand and this thing works like you're hoping and anticipating it works, is that an end to these kinds of cancers? Is it a better quality of life, or is it a reduced incidence of these cancers, or maybe a little piece of all of the above there?
Yeah, each cancer has a different goal. In the case of endometrial cancer, we have a clear target. So that's a cancer that's primarily treated with chemotherapy. So patients go into an infusion center, so you have to do it in a hospital setting.
Right.
It is incredibly toxic, and the outcomes are just okay.
Yeah.
We want to
Quality of life stinks.
It's terrible.
You're nauseous, you're losing your hair, you can't stand up. The whole
So our bullseye there is we want to knock chemotherapy off the pedestal. We want to give a patient an oral option that they can take in the comfort of their home with virtually no side effects that works better than chemotherapy.
Sure, right.
And so it's a lofty
That's
goal.
a life changer, though. I mean, now does that blanket other solid tumor cancers, though, potentially? I mean, does that change? You start thinking female solid tumor cancers, but if you can do it there, can you do it elsewhere potentially?
That's the hope, right? That one, if you're successful in one cancer, that will spill over to the next.
Right.
And the 3 cancers that we're focused on are all cancers of the female reproductive system. And so they are interrelated, not fully. You know, there's nothing 100% guaranteed, but there is at least a base connection between the 3.
Talk about CLDN6. That's the other therapy we're talking about, which is really interesting. That's the antibody sort of deal. Is that immunotherapy? Is that the same thing? Mm-hmm. No, it is. Okay, talk about that.
Mm-hmm. So that's a newer program. That's kind of the new exciting kid on the block.
Sure.
It's in preclinical development, so we're not yet in human trials. But Claudin-6 is one of these fascinating kind of holy grail targets for oncology. So for oncology, you want to develop something that only hits cancer cells, because you're trying to kill the cancer cells.
That's targeted treatment.
Targeted.
And here in San Diego, where we broadcast from, we are near the epicenter, and some people would say, of cancer research. And you hear about targeted therapy all the time for different types of cancers. You don't hear about specific cancers, but they say targeted cancers. Is the CLDN6? Is this targeting only female cancers at this point, or where are we at?
No, so this is quite broad.
Okay.
It's expressed in many different cancers. Our approach is not to boil the ocean and be scatterbrained. We want to focus on the 3 that we think are the largest market opportunities out of the gate, which is testicular, ovarian, and lung cancer.
Okay.
And so we'll initially focus on those. We can build out over time, but the idea is to use our antibody, use it to target Claudin-6 positive cancer cells, and then to get our immune system to attack those cancer cells. So to use our own bodies to kill the cancer.
Is the government helpful, with Biden coming out a while ago and saying, I want to end cancer by this date?
Is there more money coming at you?
Yeah, are they helping you guys, or is it?
Less impedance with regulation?
So I would say the FDA for oncology is its own beast. And again, they are motivated by the fact that on the other side of the table, you have patients who, if they don't get treatment, will die.
Right.
And so independent of whether it's a Republican or a Democratic legislature, everyone is highly motivated at the FDA to get these drugs approved. And what we've seen over the last 10 years, so spanning different administrations, changes in the FDA where they're more inclined to approve drugs early for cancer. So you don't have to go the full way. Eventually, you do have to run phase 3 trials and complete submission. But if the drug's having a profound effect on patients, their view is get it out to patients as fast as possible.
Before we let you out today, by the way, Marty Lehr is our guest, CEO and co-founder, as you can see on the screen there, of Context Therapeutics. They are publicly traded. CNTX. CNTX is their stock symbol. Medicines for female cancers and other solid tumors is their tagline. And of course, you can go to contexttherapeutics.com. Talk about compassionate care, because you are in the middle of compassionate care, as you just said, because your clinical trials are not just a guy that has a hurt elbow or a gal that's got a cough, as you mentioned. This is life or death for many of these folks, or it means heading back to traditional therapies, which are not which kill the quality of life specifically. Talk about compassionate care. Do you guys? When does that kick in, where you can actually start giving the drug to folks other than just in experimental trials? Is there a goal line for that?
So every company has a different approach to that. So compassionate use is a pathway within the FDA where if you have a patient somewhere who has interest in taking the drug but is not a part of your clinical trial, could you theoretically give the drug to them?
Right.
And so our view is if there's a patient that fits one of our existing trials.
Profiles, yeah.
So it's not totally off base,
Right.
but they live in 500 miles from the nearest city, and
Yeah.
they can only come. Then there are exceptions where we might provide drug.
Yeah, right.
But
and the danger, of course, is it's not fully tested, and you don't
Correct.
want a drug on the market any faster than the FDA does for that reason. I mean, you want to make sure that all the boxes are checked, correct?
And it goes both ways. So if you're a patient who can't fit in one of our trials for whatever reason,
Sure.
then it also probably means it's very hard for us to keep track of you.
Yeah, right.
And
Sure.
let you know if something is happening. So we try to do our best to give our drug to as many people as
Sure.
possible.
Right.
But there's constraints both on the patient side and our side as well at times.
His name is Marty Lehr. Marty, I hope you come back with us.
Amazing
Hope you
stuff.
well, I know you're going to come back with us. I hope you come back in person with us
Yeah.
soon. You can also see him. He's going to be on America Trends here on this very television network to talk a little bit less businessy, a little more about the problem and medicine
Trendy.
for female cancer.
Yeah.
There you go. Martin Lehr, CEO, co-founder, Context Therapeutics. ContextTherapeutics.com, CNTX.